get through some tougher content. Did anyone do their homework and look up why you get cramps in your muscles? Let me see, let's go through here. I see Jesse said yes and Pip Faith. I'd like you to write in chat what you found. Why do you get cramps in your muscles? What did you find?
You mind if I say it?
Well, this is the problem. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to participate. So if we put it in chat, then it keeps answers coming and it doesn't cut off responses. So if everybody will type in chat what you found, then I can listen to what everybody has learned. Okay, so low potassium. Yes, you can. Yeah, it can become because of low potassium. Overuse. Okay, yes, Jesse, you're getting there. Yes. So all of those things are true. But what happens to our muscles when we get cramps is that we start producing we talked about aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. What was aerobic respiration from last week? Aerobic. Yes, Aria, you use air. All right. So at some point, you will go through anaerobic respiration. What do we learn if there's an A or an "and" in front of a word? What does that mean? Yes, it means not. All right. So anaerobic respiration means that it does not use air, right? So that's kind of what happens when we start getting muscle cramps. We start going through what they call the lactic acid cycle, or when our body basically doesn't go, like you might actually be working out so hard or not be breathing enough through your exercise, not be drinking enough water. All right, might not have enough of the potassium as your body is trying to still make energy. It doesn't have all the resources it needs. So it starts going to anaerobic respiration. Okay. So that is when your muscles get cramps. All right. There's a buildup of lactic acid because of a different pathway that it takes. So we're not going to go into all of that, but you are all right on track for why we get muscle cramps, for those of you that looked. All right, so today we're going to continue further into aerobic cellular respiration. And we have several goals today that we need to get through. So let's split these up into two chunks. If Pip, you want to read, you can read the purple, and then if somebody else would read the bottom two objectives, that would be great.
I'm gonna look at the parts. Oh, Ari would read the bottom two. I'll read the first three. So I read the purple. So just making sure if you guys can hear me.
Go ahead. Yep.
All right, good. Where does cellular respiration aerobic occur? Is energy used or produced? And what is carbon dioxide's role in cellular respiration? Thank you. Ari, take it away.
Explain what is water's role in cellular respiration and show how glucose changes through cellular respiration.
Thank you. Good job, both of you. Who can tell me in chat what these different colors represent right here? Anybody? This guy right here is in green. Why is this in green? Yeah, we see it indicates synthesis. It does. So by the end of this lesson, perfect, Aria. Yes. So these guys are going to be some of the base level things that we learned today. And by the end of the lesson, we should be able to actually start doing some of these things. You should be able to start processing and moving things around with your knowledge of what we've learned in the last couple lessons. All right. So we talked about this equation or on Wednesday when we met, right? We talked about just like when you have ingredients and a product, you have the same thing when you're going to make energy, right? We talked about that you put into your body glucose from the food you eat and oxygen from the air you breathe. And when that goes into your cells, right, and it gets to all your cells via your blood, through your heart, pumping blood through your body, just like we talked about. Who remembers what we compared our heart and our bloodstream to on Wednesday? Does anybody remember? What do you remind? What do we? Something with water and inner tubes. What do you think? Yes, Faith. The bloodstream is like a lazy river. Good. And our heart is like that pump for the lazy river, right? So the oxygen and the glucose, they hop into that lazy river via our bloodstream and go all throughout our whole body to every single cell. And for every cell on our body that is living, it is living because that bloodstream is connected to it and is resourcing it with this glucose and oxygen. All right, when the glucose and oxygen come into the cell, they go through glycolysis. Who remembers where glycolysis happens? Where does glycolysis happen in the cell? We had that diagram with the candy last week, and there was a little location pin. The glucose is in the cell with the oxygen. But where does glycolysis start? That process start? Nope, we haven't made ATP quite yet. We've got the glucose and the oxygen, and they're in the cell. Not quite the nucleus. Not the water. Yes. Yes, there we go. Does anybody remember the cytoplasm? The cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm, remember, so it's going to kind of diffuse in through the cell membrane or be pumped through one of those protein channels. And it's going to be in the cytoplasm right outside the mitochondria. That's where glycolysis is going to take place. All right. And when our output, or what we're going to get from this whole process, is carbon dioxide as a waste, water as a waste, and that ATP as a source of energy that we were talking about. It's kind of like making brownies, right? What do you put into a brownie mix? Oil, eggs, water, and the mix. Good. So what ends up being a waste from this process after we mix them together? Yes, the shells, right? The shells, the box of the brownie thing ends up being waste. So we end up taking those things. That's like our glucose and oxygen, right? And when we put them together, we might get the cardboard box waste, the eggshell waste. But at the end of the day, we get what we're wanting, the product that we're hoping for. Dirty dishes, for real. Which is the brownie or the ATP. All right. Good. So this was Wednesday's lesson. We're going to compare this to cooking because I feel like cooking is something that we can relate to. So let's pretend what happened on Wednesday. Glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm or on the kitchen counter, right? You get out your eggs, you get out your oil, you get the water and measure it out. You set it all on your kitchen counter. You stick it in your bowl, right? And you mix it all up. It all happens like right there on your kitchen counter or on your kitchen island. The next process, right? If I just leave my brownie tin on my kitchen counter, will those brownies bake? No. I wouldn't be a teacher if I didn't ask a stupid question, right? No, all right. And same thing with cellular respiration. So after glycolysis is over, it goes to step 2. Just like when you bake, you mix your ingredients together and then you actually have to bake it or cook it. So out here, inside the mitochondria, we're going to compare this to the oven in our kitchen. All right, there is a couple processes. So the Krebs cycle is the very next part of our energy making process. So we have glycolysis. In glycolysis, we had our candy, right? It's the breakdown of what goes here. This was from Wednesday. Good. Let's write that in on the board. Go ahead and write that on the board. You should have tools. Yep. So it's the breakdown of glucose. What do we need to break this bond? We talked about bonds store energy, but it also takes energy to break them. Good. So we take energy, we slice our glycolysis into 2 pieces, and now we have 2 pieces of what? Who remembers what this is called? Yes, 2 pieces of pyruvic acid. We just talked about how this takes place in the cytoplasm. Will someone stick that right here? Good. So this is step 1. This is our mixing on the kitchen counter. This is glycolysis. It happens in the cytoplasm. The next step to make ATP is the Krebs cycle. Everybody type Krebs cycle. All right. And this is what happens in the Krebs cycle. So we have these 2 pieces of pyruvic acid, right? They're coming out of glycolysis. And these 2 pieces of half pieces of candy go into the mitochondria. So we move from the cytoplasm into the mitochondria. And look what happens right here. What this is 1/2 of the piece of candy. What happens right here to that piece of candy in the Krebs cycle? Yes, it gets sliced again. Look how this little wrapper piece gets chopped right off. What happens when that bond breaks? What is released? Yes, ATP is released. That when that bond breaks, energy is released. And you know who's hanging out here waiting for that? Look, here's NAD and here is a hydrogen molecule. When this pyruvic acid breaks and that energy is released from that bond, look where the energy goes. We take it here and we transfer it. And the top goes on. So this NAD molecule now becomes NADH. Do you see that? The hydrogen right here gets attached to the NAD with the energy that's released when that bond breaks. It's like dibs, right? If there's an extra piece of pizza or something that you want and you see it, you call dibs really quick or you run after it and grab it, right? So this NAD molecule is hanging out in the mitochondria. The hydrogen molecule is hanging out in the mitochondria. And as soon as a bond is broken and that energy is released, this molecule is made. Does that make sense to everybody? I don't want to move any farther. So we have a piece of glucose that comes into the cell. That glucose in glycolysis is halved, broken into 2 pieces during glycolysis. And those 2 pieces of pyruvic acid go into the mitochondria and they start going through a process one at a time. One of those pyruvic acids gets cut as soon as it gets in there. Good. And the energy from that bond is used to make this NADH. Now you're like, wait a minute, Mrs. Rittenhouse, what are we really trying to make? I thought we were here to make what? What are we trying to make? Are we here to make NADH? Brownies. We're here to make ATP, right? We're trying to learn about how our cell takes glucose to make ATP. But instead, I see us making these little purple fruit NADH things. Why? Right? Does anybody else wonder? All right, I will tell you here in a minute, okay? As we go, the Krebs cycle continues. Look, this what acetyl CoA we call it is a carbon-based molecule, right? See all those carbons? It's going to go like around a clock-like cycle 2 times. And every time it goes around to a spot in the Krebs cycle, guess what happens? Raja came to visit me. Say hi, Raj.
Princess has came back. Oh, and she's great. I might as well have to edit her.
So, what happens is as this acetyl CoA goes around the Krebs cycle, it just keeps getting cut into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. Look, here's a 6, so acetyl CoA ends up as a 6 carbon, and it comes over here, and guess what? It cuts it, breaks it, and another NADH is made. Comes down to the next spot in the Krebs cycle. Look, now we're down to 4 carbons. What happens? It gets broken. Energy is released from that bond. And guess what's made? Another NADH molecule. So what are we making in the Krebs cycle? You actually do. You make 1 ATP. You make 1 ATP, but you make a lot of what? NADH. You make a ton of NADH. So those 2 pieces from glycolysis go around the Krebs cycle, and it goes through twice. All right, because there's 2 pieces of candy. Does that make sense? So each one of those candy molecule pieces go through and get broken down and broken down and broken down and broken down. And through that process, we actually make 1 ATP molecule per cycle. So how many do we make? 1 for each piece of candy. So how many ATP molecules do we make? 1 for each piece that comes in. Almost. There's two halves that come in. Does that make sense? These 2 right here. 1, 2. 2 pieces come in, and for each piece, we get 1 ATP. So it goes around twice, and we get 1, and then the next piece comes in, and we get 1. So we get 2 ATP. Everybody type 2 ATP. Krebs. Let's do Krebs equals 2 ATP. Everybody type Krebs equals 2 ATP. So as those 2 halves of candy, that glucose molecule that was split in half into pyruvic acid, each piece of pyruvic acid comes into the Krebs cycle and goes around twice, or goes around once, right? 1 for each half. And we get 2 ATP and a whole lot of what? Two ATP, and you can put and lots of NADH. Okay. We get 2 ATP and lots of NADH. Everybody put that in there. So let's look at this again. Glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm. It breaks glucose into 2. We take the 2 halves of glucose that we got, and we bring them into the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, and we go through the Krebs cycle. And the Krebs cycle is really just the deconstructing of that pyruvic acid. It's just the cutting, the breaking of the bonds. And through that process, each half piece of candy gets broken apart. So it goes through twice. We get 2 ATP and a lot of NADH. Okay? So we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the last phase. Here we go. This is going to give you a visual of what you get. You get one of these FADH molecules. I didn't go into that. He's over here. Right, you get mostly NADH, and then you get one of these guys. He's just a little bit different. We don't need to know anything about them other than we make them, okay? And that when we make molecules, what is stored in those bonds? Bonds are a form of stored energy, okay? So there's energy stored in those bonds. So one time through, I'm going to make one FADH, one ATP, 4 NADH for one half. With both halves, all right, I'm going to make 2 FADH, 2 ATP, and 8 total NADH. This is all the NADH and FADH are stored energy. All right. All right, so let's keep moving. The last part of this process is the very end of cellular respiration. So our first step was what? What is it? First step is glycolysis and energy making. What is the second step? If glycolysis is first, what's the second step? Krebs cycle. And then we get to our third step, which is the electron transport chain, the ETC. Okay? It's a 3-step process. Just like when you make brownies, you've got to mix the ingredients. You've got to put them in a tin, right? That would be the second spot, putting them in your pan. And the third step would be baking them. Glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport chain. And this is exactly, I put this staircase on here because this is exactly how my mind kind of understands it. Have you ever taken a ball or seen a ball, or can you imagine a ball being rolled down a staircase? What would happen to that ball as it runs down the staircase? It's going to go faster. It's going to hit a step and it's going to bounce, right? It's going to hit the step and kind of maybe gain height or gain momentum. Good. That's exactly kind of how I see the last step of this process. Are you ready? This is a homemade graphic. These are homemade graphics because this is how my mind makes sense of this. Here we go. You know all those NADH and FADH molecules that we made during the Krebs cycle go? It's like a really fun game, and we're going to take those molecules, we're going to pretend they're balls, and we're going to start chucking them down a staircase. All right, they go rolling down what we call the electron transport chain, and it will roll them down one at a time. And as they roll and as they hit the stairs, what happens to their tops? Boop. They pop off, right? When that hydrogen comes off of the NAD molecule, what is released again? Energy. Yep. Energy is released, and we have a adenosine diphosphate and phosphates waiting out here. Okay, so we have an ADP and phosphate, just like we had these guys waiting earlier in the mitochondria. We have ADP and phosphate waiting out here, and when they see that bond broken and energy up for dibs, that adenosine diphosphate and those phosphates bond to make ATP. Does that make sense? So, although we weren't trying to make NADH or FADH, we make them for our end goal, because what happens is we collect all those molecules. Basically, we collect them to destroy them, right? So that we can roll them all down the electron transport chain at one time and make bank ATP. Lots of ATP is created in the electron transport chain. Now, I want to ask you a question. What did we learn about hydrogen and what happens when it bonds? What did we learn about that in Unit 2? What did we learn about hydrogen bonds? Yes, it's the weakest bond. So if this bond was really hard to break, do you think we'd be able to make so much ATP in this process? We wouldn't. Our bodies, our cells are smart, and we utilize those weak hydrogen bonds as a source of easy stored energy. And when our bodies go through this electron transport chain, we break hydrogen bonds. We don't break ionic bonds, because ionic bonds are strong. It would take too much energy to break an ionic bond. We wouldn't get that energy from it, right? So the FADH and the NADH roll down in mass quantities. If you remember, how many NADH and FADH did we have total? At the end of the Krebs cycle, we had 8 and 2. So those are going to be taken with us. All 10 of those are going to be taken to the electron transport chain with us to be broken. All right. Here we go. This is where I'm showing you how they get rolled down. The tops break off, and then we make ATP, right? This ATP synthase molecule shoots them out from an area of high concentration to low, and our ADP molecules strike out. So total, we make 34 ATP from the electron transport chain. Okay. Total from that, we make 34. So let's look here. I want you to tell me the locations of where this stuff takes place. Where does glycolysis take place? It's step 1. Step 1 of energy making. Step 1 of cellular respiration. Glycolysis happens where? Awesome. Somebody type it up there for me. Good job. Happens in the cytoplasm. What about the Krebs cycle? Where does that happen? Yep. Mitochondria. And the electron transport chain happens in the, yep, mitochondria. Good job, guys. I'm so proud of you. This is a complex process, right? This is how our cells take what we eat and make the energy currency that they need to do all the things that our body needs to do to survive. All right. It's your turn now. Remember how I told you were going to go up here to that top of the triangle today? That green area? you get to make your own comic today. Okay? I want you to make your own comic about cellular respiration. I don't care if you make it just about glycolysis or just about the Krebs cycle or just about the electron transport chain, or maybe you'll be like me and just use the equation and do it like a holistic perspective. There is not a wrong way to do this. Okay, there's not a wrong way to do this. Oh, lessons, not sons. Lessons 3.15 and 3.16. Oops. If you go to the storyboard, this is for a participation grade. All right. You'll be getting points in what's it called? Some power school. I'm forgetting. Life school. Yep. Live school participation points. And it's fun. All right. It's a fun way of just processing this information. So, what you're going to do right now and just today is go to storyboardthat.com. It's a fun activity that you are going to just use the information that we've gained in the last 2 lessons on how you make ATP. All right. So, I feel like we've done a good job. We learned that aerobic respiration is respiration that what energy? It requires energy, oxygen. Yes, you have to do this. Is energy used or produced in cellular respiration? Somebody tell me in chat. Yep, we're making energy. What is carbon dioxide's role in cellular respiration? Is it a product or a reactant? A reactant or a product? Good, it's produced as waste. What about water? Produced as waste. Good. And the last is to show how glucose changes through cellular respiration. And really, the best way to say it or think about it is it just keeps getting cut. All right. Just like if I cut a piece of celery or a banana or something in half, and then I took the half and cut it in half, and then I cut it in half again. Right. We're making just breaking bonds and cutting it into smaller and smaller pieces to create our NADH and FADH molecules to store them up and use for that. Oh, what happened to my slides? Oh, electron transport chain. Okay, that's not it either. Awesome. Well, that is what I have for you today. I know that was a lot, but I need of me talking, but some days there's just more of that because it's important for me to get through holistic lessons like that. So, what are you doing today? I want to say today is less of a choice. Today is for you to work on those comic strips. All right. That is what your next step is today. Something what you're going to do on your own time, your own learning, to cement this in your mind, to kind of make this fit. Because things, it's just like a pair of jeans. Sometimes you put them on and they don't feel great. You don't like the way they fit. But when you wear them and break things in, that you're gonna, so what you're gonna do is just make a comic about how cellular respiration happens. So like this one I show just like we talked about the kitchen counter, right? And all the ingredients that go in. So I start with my glucose. I come over here to the stove top with my oxygen. I add them together. And then at the end, I got my ATP, my oxygen, or my carbon dioxide and my water. Okay. Nope, you don't have to do all 3 processes. I think it's comprehensive and it kind of helps you fit the 3 processes together if you do the 3 processes, but you don't have to. Okay? I'd like you to just work on that. Yep, storyboardthat.com. I think it gives you, Justin, a way to download it. And then I'm going to have a Google slide tomorrow that you'll post it on. Okay? So you can do one process or all 3. Glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain. Just go back and listen to the lesson, Ireland, and see if that helps. Okay, because coming late in the middle of this complex process is probably is confusing. So go back and listen to the lesson once I get this posted. And then I think you understand. It's just like we talked about, just like baking, right? You do it in phases. You don't just do it and it all comes together. So as our cells take that glucose that we feed our body, there's different steps in breaking it down to create the ATP that we need. And so that's how we're kind of going to take a chemical process thing and make it into a picture thing that we can relate to. You don't have to use a kitchen. This storyboard has all kinds of scenes and settings, and it's super fun. There are 3 steps to creating energy. Glycolysis we went over on Monday. And then today we did the 2nd step, which is Krebs cycle, and the 3rd step, which is electron transport chain. Bring it to class tomorrow because we're going to put it in a document tomorrow, a Google Slides tomorrow. You'll all get your own Google slide. So either do a snip of it and save it to your computer, or I think there's an option to download it. Okay, so save it to your computer and bring it.
I believe there's an option to like upload, but I'm not entirely sure what it does.
Yeah, yep, that's perfect. Now we won't upload it to, I mean, you can upload it to wherever you want. Just make sure you can bring a like ping copy of it tomorrow to class. Or if there's a way to make it animated, that's fun too. I haven't revisited it lately, but it is a super fun website. All right, well, I will end it on time so that I do not leave you hanging. I'm going to leave this slide up so that you can have that website. Have a great day, everyone. Happy Halloween.